I've raised both male and female Shih Tzus over the years, not at the same time, but long enough to understand that each gender carries its own kind of energy. At first, I was like many people choosing a dog based on instinct, on the first look, on an undeniable sense of cuteness. But as time passed, when life became less about pretty photos and more about daily routines, feeding, sleeping, cleaning, training, and dealing with exhaustion, I began to understand why some people say, not everyone is suited to raising a male Shih Tzu. That doesn't mean male Shih Tzus are bad. In fact, many male Shih Tzus are deeply affectionate, loyal, and closely attached to their owners. But those very traits, if you're not mentally prepared, can become overwhelming. The difference isn't about whether the dog is well-behaved or difficult. It's about whether your lifestyle fits the kind of temperament you're bringing into your home. And if there's one place where longtime owners usually notice the difference first, it's not in appearance, it's in how behavior unfolds over time. Part 1. The quiet stubbornness of male Shih Tzus isn't always obvious. At first, male Shih Tzus don't show their challenges right away. As puppies, they're just as sweet, responsive, and attached as females. But after some time, especially as they begin to mature, I started to notice a shared pattern among many male Shih Tzus. Their stubbornness appears slowly and quietly, not in an aggressive way, not through loud resistance or destructive behavior, but in a very specific manner. They understand the command, but choose not to follow it. You call them, they hear you. You give a signal, they recognize it, and yet they pause. Look at you for a moment, and then decide whether or not they feel like responding. For a patient owner, this isn't a major issue. But for first-time dog owners, it can be frustrating because you don't know what you're doing wrong. I remember a period when my male Shih Tzu took noticeably longer to learn commands. Not because he wasn't intelligent, but because he had a stronger sense of self-decision. He wanted to act on his own timing, in his own way. It took me a long time to understand that with male Shih Tzus, force doesn't work. Pressure only makes them more resistant. What works is consistency, calm repetition, and emotional steadiness. Without that, training becomes a struggle not because the dog is difficult, but because the approach doesn't match their temperament. This doesn't make male Shih Tzus a bad choice, but it does mean they may not be the best match for people who want quick results, tight control, or minimal adjustment to their own habits. Living with a male Shih Tzu often requires slowing down, observing more, and accepting that you won't always be the one in full control. And that's only the beginning of the story. Part 2. Marking behavior is less about bad habits and more about instinct. One of the topics people hesitate to talk about when choosing a male Shih Tzu is marking behavior. And I understand why it's uncomfortable. It sounds messy, and it often gets framed as a deal breaker. But after years of living with male Shih Tzus, I've learned that marking isn't a sign of a problem dog. It's a sign of instinct meeting an indoor human lifestyle. When my male Shih Tzu was younger, everything seemed fine. He learned house training, followed routines, and rarely had accidents. Then, gradually, small changes appeared. A corner he sniffed a little longer, a chair leg he seemed oddly interested in. A moment of hesitation before lifting his leg, not confusion, but intention. At first, I thought I had missed something in training, but I hadn't.
Good boy.
What I was seeing wasn't disobedience. It was biology waking up. Marking doesn't always mean constant accidents. Sometimes it's subtle and occasional. Sometimes it only appears when the environment changes. A new smell, a visitor, another dog nearby, even stress. And this is where many owners feel caught off guard. They expect training alone to solve it, when in reality, consistency, supervision, and management matter just as much. What helped most was understanding patterns instead of reacting emotionally. I learned when marking was more likely to happen and adjusted routines accordingly. More frequent walks, clear boundaries indoors, calm corrections instead of frustration. And when neutering became part of the discussion, it wasn't framed as a punishment, but as a practical choice based on our living situation. Female Shih Tzus can have their own challenges, but marking is far less common with them. That doesn't make one better than the other. It simply means different owners tolerate different things more easily. Some people barely notice occasional marking. Others find it stressful. Neither reaction is wrong. Living with a male Shih Tzu taught me that this behavior isn't something to fear, but it is something to be honest about. If you understand it, plan for it, and respond calmly, it becomes manageable. If you expect it to never happen at all, that's when frustration begins. And like many things with male Shih Tzus, it isn't about blame. It's about knowing what kind of daily reality you're comfortable living with before making a long-term commitment. Part 3. Clinginess, affection, or pressure. One of the qualities people often praise in male Shih Tzus is how attached they are. And it's true many male Shih Tzus form a very strong bond with their owners. They follow closely, seek contact often, and seem happiest when they know exactly where you are. At first, this kind of closeness feels comforting. It makes you feel chosen. But over time, I learned that this deep attachment can mean different things depending on who you are and how you live. My male Shih Tzu wanted to be involved in everything. If I stood up, he stood up. If I moved rooms, he followed. If I sat down, he positioned himself as close as possible, sometimes touching, sometimes watching, but always aware. He didn't demand attention loudly, but his presence was constant, like a quiet reminder that I was never alone. For some people, this is exactly what they want in a dog. A companion who is emotionally tuned in, loyal, and deeply connected. But there were moments when I realized that this closeness also came with responsibility. On days when I was tired, overwhelmed, or simply needed space, I could feel his confusion. Not distress, but a subtle unease, as if my distance disrupted the rhythm he depended on. This is where the line between affection and pressure becomes important. A male Shih Tzus attachment isn't about control, but it can feel heavy if you're not prepared for it. They don't easily detach. They don't switch off emotionally. Their sense of security is closely tied to your presence and consistency. Female Shih Tzus, in my experience, often show affection differently. Still loving, still bonded, but a little more independent in how they hold that connection. Again, this isn't a rule, and every dog is an individual. But the pattern appears often enough that it's worth considering. Living with a male Shih Tzu taught me that closeness is a gift, but it's also a commitment. If you enjoy constant companionship and emotional connection, it can be deeply fulfilling. If you value more independence for yourself or your dog, it can sometimes feel like pressure. Neither experience is wrong. What matters is recognizing which one fits your life better, and choosing with honesty rather than expectation. Part 4. When a male Shih Tzu is truly the right fit for you. After years of living with both male and female Shih Tzus, I've learned that the real question is never whether a male Shih Tzu is good or bad. The real question is much quieter: does your life make room for the way he loves? Because when a male Shih Tzu fits your life, the bond can be deeply rewarding in a way that's hard to explain to someone who hasn't lived it. A male Shih Tzu tends to suit people who are emotionally present and consistent. Not perfect, not endlessly patient, but steady. He thrives when routines are predictable, when responses are calm, and when his human doesn't send mixed signals. If you're someone who enjoys structure, regular walks, familiar schedules, clear boundaries, a male Shih Tzu often settles beautifully into that rhythm. He may test you at first, but once he understands where he belongs, he commits fully. He is also well suited to people who don't mind being needed. A male Shih Tzu doesn't love halfway. When he bonds deeply. He notices when your energy shifts. He reacts when you're distracted or distant. For someone who values emotional connection and companionship, This can feel incredibly meaningful. He doesn't just share your space. He shares your moods, your routines, and your quiet moments. I've noticed that male Shih Tzus do especially well with owners who communicate through calm presence rather than force. If you tend to raise your voice quickly or expect instant compliance, you may find the relationship frustrating. But if you're someone who observes, adjusts, and responds with consistency instead of pressure, a male Shih Tzu often responds with loyalty that feels almost personal. He learns you, not just commands. A male Shih Tzu can also be a good match for people who spend a lot of time at home or enjoy having a constant companion nearby. He is the kind of dog who settles beside your chair, follows you from room to room, and quietly checks in throughout the day. For retirees, remote workers, or anyone who values shared presence over independence, this closeness can become one of the most comforting parts of daily life. That said, honesty matters. If you need long stretches of solitude, unpredictable schedules, or emotional distance, a male Shih Tzu may struggle to understand that rhythm. He doesn't interpret distance as neutrality. He experiences it as change, not panic, but confusion. And that confusion can show up as restlessness, clinginess, or subtle behavioral shifts that require patience to navigate. What I've come to believe is that male Shih Tzus are not demanding by nature, they are responsive. They reflect what they're given. In a calm, stable environment, they soften. In a chaotic or inconsistent one, they become unsettled. This isn't a flaw. It's simply how they connect. In the end, choosing a male Shih Tzu isn't about avoiding challenges. Every dog brings challenges. It's about choosing the kind of relationship you're ready for. A male Shih Tzu offers closeness, loyalty, and emotional presence. He asks for patience, clarity, and consistency in return. There is no universal recommendation, only alignment. Some people will thrive with a male Shih Tzu and feel deeply fulfilled by the bond they build together. Others may feel overwhelmed and wonder why it feels harder than expected. Neither experience is a failure. Both are simply reflections of fit. What matters most is not the gender of the dog, but the honesty of the choice. When you choose based on who you are, not who you think you should be, both you and your Shih Tzu have the chance to feel truly at home with each other.